Chuck, have I got an interesting topic for you today?
Should I be scared?
I can't imagine you scared, to be quite honest. I'm just trying to picture it. We had a podcast a while back, and in that podcast, we've actually received feedback from some of the listeners. So thank you to all who listen. And it was around culture and talent management.
Oh, yeah.
And we specifically used the words talent management. As you know, I'm a trained talent manager. I specifically look for what are the talents in people and how can we best utilize those. But our system doesn't always do that. We look at a rank system. Now, why I enjoy talent management really comes from some of the lessons I learned in the field. And so being at a forward operating base with 130 people, you learn very quickly that I don't think that when we were out there, I saw ranks, like people were wearing t-shirts most of the time when we were at the FA. There are some people I couldn't even tell you what their rank was, but I could look at any group of people and tell you exactly what their talents were. Because when you're living so close in such a weird situation, and some of those talents were super useful, like that guy over there is the best construction guy I ever saw. That's not his day job. But if you ask him how to like build you a bookshelf for your like little tent, oh, that guy's the best guy for it. That guy plays the best guitar around any campfire. I want that guy with me. I went out as security, but I'm a comms guy. And when our satellites weren't working, I got in there and I helped fix the satellite. Nobody thought that that was going to be Martin at the FOB, but that's what we did. And to be quite honest, the number one talented person I loved out there was my sniper. Because that guy knew exactly what was going on. The situational awareness, I don't care what rank. That guy was one of the, I found out when we got home, he was a corporal. I'm like, really? Corporal? But it tells me how we think differently between rank systems and talent systems. And so I'd love today for our conversation to be around rank systems and talent systems. Where do you think we go right? Where can we do improvements?
Well, that's a huge topic, but yeah, very interesting, Marty. Yeah, very interesting. So, I think I mentioned to you some time ago that we gave up rewarding talent when we decided that trades pay somehow didn't work for us in the Army. And I can't tell you the exact date, but it had to do with unification and trying to bring these three services together. But you know, before unification, it was normal to see in the Army. It was normal to have someone start as a private and retire as a private. You know, do 25 years and never make it above private. Not because they didn't have the brains. They didn't want to be a leader. They were quite comfortable being a private. By the same token, it was quite normal. And this carried over past integration into my early career. I remember having a discussion with a CFR platoon that I was an instructor for, where we got into a discussion. I got into a discussion with a couple of Air Force warrant officers and a master corporal and an Army warrant officer and me sitting in the mess. And we were trying to rationalize the different types of leadership and how, although we all wore the same uniform, because we all wore green in those days, we all had the same rank structure, that the Air Force needs and rank structure and the way they treated each other was fundamentally different, especially on the flight line, than the Army. And it was very enlightening because I was a young captain. I wasn't even 30 years old yet. Yeah, I am. I may have thought I knew a lot, but I really didn't. And, you know, a corporal was a corporal to me. And, you know, the Air Force warrant officers were like, you know, Chuck, it's not like that. You know, in the Army, you don't get to have 40-year-old corporals because at a certain point you muster them out because they don't want to be master corporals. And you say, no, you've got to be promoted or we're going to get rid of you somehow. Right. And I said, well, that's harsh, but okay, I'll buy that. And the Army warrant officer was like, nah, there's some truth there. not exactly. And the Air Force warrant officer was like, well, fellas, you know, to have a 45-year-old corporal on the flight line is quite normal because this guy joined as an aero engine tech, and that's all he's ever wanted to do. He only wants to be an aero engine tech. He doesn't really want to leave the corporal's mess. He just wants to be the best aero engine tech that he could be. And he dreams of us buying a new aircraft so he gets to learn about a new aero engine, right? And so when, the pilot grabs his parachute and helmet and walks out to the fighter that he's about to mount, and, this aero engine tech has done the pre-flight check and the pilot's about to do his pre-flight check, it's not, hey, sir, how's it going? Oh, fine, corporal. It's, hey, John, how you feeling today? And John says, not bad, Marty. Now, how's the engine? Oh, she's in good shape. Attaboy. And, the Army warrant officer and I are like, no, that ain't going to happen in a tank park. Right. And I think that, we have reintroduced some trades pay and we have reintroduced some bonus pay. And in fact, it's an issue right now with the RCAF because we got a lot of pilots who are turning down promotion to major because they give up pay and benefits when they get promoted. And so this is something that we struggle with. And I'm not sure we have figured this out, but, I think, overemphasize rank and underemphasize ability and skill sets. Maybe not consciously. I don't think consciously a major or a lieutenant colonel looks down on someone of an inferior rank, but subconsciously she may not appreciate that corporal who's the cook in the canteen has got skill sets that can make that cook 3 times the amount of money if they went to a community college and then went to work in the kitchens at the Chateau Laurier. And interestingly, when I was the chief of staff at Fort Frontenac, our chief cook was a sergeant who had been the chief cook at the Chateau Frontenac. And when I found that out, I was like, Sergeant, c'est vrai? He said, oh, oui, monsieur. I said, well, you left the Chateau Frontenac as the chef to become an army cook? Ah, oui. This is much more fun. He said, being the chief chef at the Chateau Frontenac was hard, and no fun. I love cooking for soldiers. It's fun.
Well, it's funny you bring that because this conversation started with me learning lessons in the field. And one thing I can tell you was Forward Operating Base had the single best food out of any mess I have ever been in.
Better than on ship.
Oh, we've had some great meals on ship. I've had some great meals on bases. I'm just simply saying that we were out in the middle of nowhere and they brought us the world-class members of the culinary community.
Wow.
And what a difference that made to the morale.
Sure.
So even on days when I had to go to CAF or I had to go somewhere else, I was like, oh man, I just want to get back home so I can have like actual food. Send me back to the forward base because the food out there was just fabulous. But that brings me to the question I kind of want to pose around this, which is, like you said, a corporal's a corporal's a corporal. I think our brains have become so used to seeing the rank that if you take those same corporals and put them into their trade, not in the military. So let's take everybody who went to down, like you just said, went downtown. If I'm downtown and I've got a corporal cook and I've got a corporal IT professional and I've got a corporal plumber, they're not getting paid the same. Society has already, rightly or wrongly, placed a value on each of those different things that is out in the corporate world. My cook and my IT guy, they're not getting paid the same,
no.
Especially if he's a network admin.
Yeah.
But we have network admins who are corporals.
Right.
Beside cooks. And again, we have chefs beside engineers. And we've kind of blanketed the notion of rank being the value of the service. And I'm wondering, is there some sort of value to assessing, like you just talked about an airframe tech? When I was a recruiter, I had to spend time in board and learning about each of these different trades so I could talk about them intelligently.
Yes.
1 week there, and you already know, oh my God, every one of these people, if they're not dedicated to this military, there's a job for them in every airport around. Like how we keep any of it, God bless the Air Force for their Bob and their Dave.
Yeah.
Because it keeps people together. Because those jobs are so sought after in the world. And the one thing I can put my hand over my heart right now and say, I spent enough time in PCC and personnel management that if there's not someone right now today as we're having this conversation looking for a cook or for an engineer for a boat, I'll eat my own hat. I will eat my beret, thank you. Because every day someone's looking for a cook and an engineer. Why? They're very easy trades to move across, and we're always short.
Yes.
If we know this about what we have, is there a different way we could look at the value of trades or pay structure? Because our pay structure really hasn't changed in a very long time. And again, I don't want to make this about money. I want to make this about the same thing you talked about in a different podcast, which is around dignity. That there is a dignity to being an amazing cook. And I would tell those cooks out in that forward base every day, God bless you. You are amazing. I look forward. I don't care what I had to do today or how gruff it was. I knew your meal was waiting for me back here.
Yes.
And I, I have my MREs in the field.
Yeah.
but,
Yeah.
but those ain't cutting it
No.
when you know there's a fresh one coming back. How we could change the dignity of trade and the value. Any thoughts on how we could do that?
Yeah. Yeah. So you three things came to mind as you were speaking. And the first one is something that we talked about before. I can't remember when, maybe first or second podcast, which was that we need to reintroduce a culture in our military, all four services, Army, Navy, Air Force, Special Forces, that says, we care about you as a human being, and our culture is one of camaraderie, as opposed to this is how much you get paid, go do your job. And I'm not saying that that's, what we do, but certainly the fact that our messes at all rank levels have been closing down and are pretty much closed across the country tells us that we're certainly trending or have already trended beyond the point where we should be, because the answer was always, well, we need to pay our service personnel so that they can afford to live on the economy because we want them to be integrated into the community that they're in. And I was part of this, and I resisted for a long time. I mean, as a CO, I lived in quarters. As a lieutenant colonel, a senior lieutenant, seven years in rank, my family and I lived in PMQs. Not necessarily because we had to. We eventually built a house, but because I loved the idea of being on base. The guys that I worked with were on the same street as I was. My kids played with their kids, and they all knew that, if something happened, that all of their dads and moms would disappear, and they weren't baffled by it because, they watched us go to work every day, putting a uniform on. Right? It was a cultural thing. So I think we need to work harder to bring some of that back. Not all of it. All of it wasn't great, but some of it was. So that's the first thing. The next thing is, I think the Armed Forces is trying, I don't know how well it's succeeding, to decouple rank from pay. With this new pay raise that they got, and pay incentives and signing bonuses and trade pay and all of these things that are slowly creeping in and being played with. And of course, there are disgruntled people, and there are people that are overwhelmed with how amazingly good it is. And they're learning because they're designing this plane as it's flying. So I think we need to cut them some slack. Maybe some of the things that they're doing are head scratchers, but certainly I think I've mentioned this to you before, but it makes so much sense to me that if a corporal says, I'm leaving, no, I don't want to take the junior leaders course to become a master corporal. And that corporal's boss says, hey, Frank, come here. Listen, what are you going to go and do? Well, I'm going to go and learn to be a plumber. Okay. Well, you're 19 years old. You can learn to be a plumber when you're 25. Why don't you take the junior leaders course, right? Allow us to promote you to master corporal. And if you finish the course, right, we're going to give you a couple $1,000. And if you then sign on for 4 more years, at the end of the 4 years, you can leave then, and we'll give you $40,000, whether you leave or you stay. Right? And people will say, oh, geez, that's a lot of money to give a guy as he walks out the door. The correct answer is giving that individual $40,000 to stay 4 more years is 1/10 the cost of starting someone over at Saint Jean, the recruit school. Right? The third thing that came to mind, we had something back in the dark ages, BI, before internet, called lot rep. Land orientation training plan, retraining PI, the acronym. What it basically meant was it was allowing combat arms corporals to apply for lot rep and move to a trade, any trade, because combat arms wasn't a trade, right? So I used to have a lot of corporals that would come to me and say, sir, I want to apply for lot rep. And I would always interview them. I was a young captain, atom officer of the squadron. And I remember talking to my squadron commander, who was a great squadron commander. And he was kind of grumpy about, losing corporals. And we agreed that if this was a corporal that we saw had potential to become a sergeant, I would try and talk them out of it. If this was a corporal who was not really worth keeping, just filling a space, I would encourage them to go and become a carpenter or a plumber or a welder, right? Because, then society would gain, we would get a new kid in from the recruit school, right? So we would both sort of win. And we could maybe train this new kid to be better than the kid that left. And the argument I used to use with the ones that I wanted to stay, it was, look, you're doing really well. Why do you want to leave? Well, I need a trade. I've been in the Army 12 years, and when I'm going to get out at 20, I want to have a trade so I can, go. I said, okay, look at it this way. You're going to leave now. You're going to give up your master corporals. You're going to revert to corporal, and you're going to spend 2 years in Borden, let's say, learning to become a welder. Okay? Yes, sir. I said, okay. So then you're going to join a welding firm, and then you're going to start your apprenticeship, because they won't recognize what you learned in the Army as a welder. No, I know that. So you're going to, to get your blue ticket or your red ticket or whatever, it's going to take you like another 7 or 8 years. And you're going to be well into your 40s by the time that you're going to be making real money. You'll be welding the whole time. And that's all you'll be doing. Just welding. If you stay in the Army, you're going to get promoted. You have potential, in my mind, at least to the rank of warrant officer. You get to be a warrant officer. You think that you're going to leave and you have no skills. You're wrong. You leave the Armored Corps, in our case, as a warrant officer. You have been trained in leadership, man management. You're probably going to be an SQ, a squadron quartermaster, which means that the minute you take your uniform off as a warrant officer, or even as a senior sergeant, you can go to any small company in any small town, maybe a hardware store, and say, I can run this store for you. I can manage this business for you. I can run your loading dock, right? As an SQ, you can run a loading dock for, Weston Foods. It's just, a loading dock. I worked on a loading dock as a teenager. A loading dock is sort of the same size as a regimental quartermaster stores. These are the skills that you have that'll make you 10 times more valuable, and you'd be a lot happier than just welding for the rest of your life. I'd say my success rate using that argument was like 60%. And I can name at least 2 of those corporals that became RSMs.
Mm. So if I could just, because I love to, there's a lot there.
Yeah. Wow.
What I heard was 3 overarching topics. One was military community.
Yes.
That there is a space in the way talent is being used inside our military community that isn't creating the cohesion and the engagement we might want.
Correct.
And that we might want to place some more attention on how do we engage at all levels.
Yes.
The second piece I heard just dropped out of my head for a second. So we'll go to the third one, which is around progression and those spaces that you could use to make sure that someone's always growing.
Yes.
Whether you're growing inside your trade or you're growing as a person or you're growing in the community. We sometimes measure only the growth we like I just said, that guy who was playing guitar at the campfire, we don't look at that growth.
Right.
We don't measure that. But maybe we should. And what I mean by that is that person kept a lot of morale up on a lot of nights around a lot of campfires.
Yeah.
How do we put that into our system? And the second point you made, which was just returned to me now, was around retention. And as a recruiter, I always used to sometimes think about the sausage factory, that you are just putting so much in to try and come, to get to operational function point. The amount of people we bring into the beginning that make it to first off, we don't get everybody to operational function point.
Right.
And the energy to get to operational function point. You're useful now. And not that you were useless before, but it is a lot of effort to take someone off the street and say, okay, now you're ready to pick any trade, cook, engineer, airframe, whatever. That's never easy. And yet when someone's like, I'm unhappy, we let them go faster than we say, how can we make this so you'll stay?
Good point. Yeah.
And that's what I heard you say. I'm just reflecting back to you, but I'm trying to sum it up in a way of these are some of the questions that really need to be, and I'm just saying looked at. I'm not saying we're doing bad. I'm saying they're incomplete. Could we make a more complete answer around community engagement? Could we make a more complete answer around progression? Could we make a more complete answer around retention?
I think we could. And I will use a simple example that may be paradoxical. When soldiers went off, when I was on regimental duty and soldiers went off to do the junior leaders course, and when soldiers came back from being in jail, paradoxically, they came back stoked. They were hyped up because they had been held to a much higher standard than everyday regimental duty. Because keeping that kind of energy up on regimental duty is hard, but on a course, right? You push them hard. You push them really hard, especially on leadership courses. We do push them.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, when you go to jail, you get pushed beyond hard. And what I discovered was that when I sat down and talked with these guys, that, over a beer or coffee, that they very quickly became disappointed. They became disenchanted with everyday regimental life because it was dull compared to the excitement of having the sergeant push them hard, of having the warrant officer tell them that they needed to work harder, that the standard was higher than what they had achieved, that maybe they achieved the standard, but he wanted more because you were capable of more. And a lot of them would say to me, sir, why don't we push our guys harder? And I honestly, I would make some excuse, but back of my mind, I always sort of felt like, I wish I could push you harder. I really do wish I could. I think it would work, but we might both end up in jail.
Well, and finishing up, that is a space to think about, is around how our talent can be pushed to excellence and it can be pushed out the door.
Wow, that's good. Yeah.
And I like to say that because you've got a couple ways to vote. You've got a way to vote with your feet right out the door.
Yeah.
Those four releases are pretty easy. Especially after a certain point. What did they used to say? The 30-30-30 plan?
30.
Yeah, 30 seconds to piss me off, 30 minutes to write my letter, 30 days and I'm out the door.
Yeah.
But I bring that up as a pressure makes diamonds. Pressure also crushes coal and makes dust.
Yeah.
And that there's a space in there to look at. And I like those points you brought up earlier around engagement, around retention, and around performance as things to maybe ask, how are other places doing it and what can we do differently?
We have the skills. We just need to use them.
Yeah. So thank you so much for a wonderful conversation. I don't think this is the last time talent is going to come up in our conversations.
Probably not.
All right. You have a wonderful day, Chuck.
You too, Marty.
Until next time, thank you, listeners.
Bye-bye.